Glorious greetings to you, dazzling watcher of wonders. Where are you tuning in from today? A secret island hideout, a mountaintop cabin, or the luxurious depths of your blanket fortress? Drop your coordinates in the comments. And remember, this magic runs on your good vibes and generous shares. Let's dive headfirst into the fun. Wesley Boyle, my best friend and an Irishman by birth, has always felt like family. His roots trace back to Connemara, where his father earned a living from the sea as a fisherman. When Wesley was just a small child, his family moved to the U.S., settling in Louisiana to stay with his father's brother. At first, they lived in a modest trailer, and Wesley's father joined his uncle on a shrimping boat. By the time Wesley reached the age of 9, his dad had managed to buy 2 boats of his own, and their family moved into a cozy home just a few houses away from mine. That's when our bond really began to take shape. From then on, we were virtually inseparable, sticking close through middle school, high school, and finally college. After graduation, I entered the ROTC and went on to serve in the U.S. Army. Wesley, on the other hand, chose to go back to his ancestral home in Connemara to reconnect with extended family. His whole family, including his 3 sisters and parents, had often returned to Ireland over the years. This time, Wesley stayed behind, settling in with his grandmother and remaining there for an entire year. My first assignment as an officer was to attend the Basic Officer Leadership course, commonly known as BLC, which provided a foundation in military leadership. It was more intense than my ROTC experience, but it was manageable. Once BLC was behind me, I received my first posting at SHAPE, Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, in Casteau, Belgium. It's NATO's central military hub, and I found myself the most junior officer among an elite team of top representatives from across the alliance. Frankly, I felt like I didn't belong, like I had accidentally ended up among military giants. About 3 months into my assignment, Wesley sent me a message inviting me to visit him in Connemara for a weekend. It had been years since we'd last seen each other, so I jumped at the chance. Only then did I discover something I hadn't realized. Connemara isn't a town, it's a whole region. I flew into Limerick, where Wesley met me at the airport and drove us to Clifton, where his grandmother lived in a small cottage. The trip took roughly 2 hours, and along the way, we passed through Galway City after crossing the bay. We paused there for a meal and a couple of drinks, something that had once gotten us into plenty of trouble. We'd had our first experience with alcohol at 13, sneaking into my parents' stash and drinking way too much. The hangover was brutal, and the punishment worse. After that, we steered clear of booze for quite a while. So sitting together in a snug Galway pub years later, slowly enjoying pints and reminiscing, felt like we'd come full circle. Wesley shared that his grandmother was still in great shape and thrilled to have him back in Ireland. She had even started encouraging him to remain permanently, introducing him to women in hopes that he might settle down. Wesley had always taken pride in his Irish identity, but seeing him among family and surrounded by familiar hills and sea air, it was clear that he belonged. His grandmother still had an undeniable presence. Her beauty hadn't faded with time. You could easily picture how radiant she must have been in her younger days. Karen Boyle had a kind of glow that few retain into old age. She might have been mistaken for Wesley's mother. Full of spirit and loved by everyone in town, Karen had a talent and a passion for matchmaking. Just a short drive from Clifton was Lisdoonvarna, famous for Ireland's largest matchmaking festival. Karen had launched a local version in Clifton and had grand plans to grow it. When I first met her, she greeted me with, "Ah, so you're the rascal who always got my Wesley into mischief." Whatever stories Wesley had told, I found her immediately likable. We ended up having a fantastic few days. During my stay, I was introduced to a young woman named Stella, who clearly hoped that Wesley might stay in Ireland, and perhaps choose her. Both she and Wesley understood exactly what Karen was attempting. But it was never going to happen. Wesley had no plans to remain in Ireland permanently, and Stella wasn't about to leave Clifton behind. They got along well, though, and there was a strong connection between them. Stella had deep roots in the town and a wide circle of friends. She arranged a night out at the pub she and Wesley loved and invited me along. I'd love to say that the Irish women were instantly taken with me, but that wouldn't be true. Not that I was being overly forward. As an American abroad, I was aware that we sometimes carry a less than flattering reputation. Just like in Belgium, I made it a point to stay courteous. One thing BLC drilled into us was the importance of showing respect when you're in someone else's country. You're a guest, and you should act like one, law-abiding and considerate, because your conduct reflects on more than just you. So I kept things low-key. When I offered to buy a round of drinks, I was gently shut down. As the visitor, they insisted I wasn't to pay. Wesley leaned over and said, "The Irish are the most giving people you'll ever meet, right up until you cross them. Then you're done, until they decide to forgive you." Over those 2 nights in Clifton, I got to know one of Stella's friends pretty well. Her name was Molly, and she looked like she'd stepped out of an old Irish ballad. Bright red hair, pale skin, and a quick, clever tongue that kept me both laughing and off balance. When the time came for me to leave and return to Shape, Molly showed up at Karen's to see me off. She took my phone, added her contact details, and handed it back. Then she gave me a kiss on the cheek and walked away. Something I noticed during my time there was a peculiar local habit. People often left parties without saying goodbye. On the first evening, Wesley explained that it was a custom known as the Irish goodbye, or the French exit. Supposedly, it started when someone had one too many and slipped away quietly to avoid drawing attention. Over time, it became the accepted way to leave. No fuss, no farewells, just gone. Molly and I started talking more often, and gradually, we began spending more time together. Over the span of several months, I made weekend trips to see her, sometimes to Clifton, other times to Limerick. For about 6 months, we met whenever our calendars allowed. At Shape, I found genuine satisfaction in my role, particularly surrounded by the diversity of an international workforce. My desk was nestled among officers hailing from the UK, Denmark, Turkey, and Italy. One of them, a captain from Copenhagen, fit perfectly the image I'd always associated with Scandinavian elegance, graceful and effortlessly striking. Her name was Ingrid, though she pronounced it Ingrid. She had an easy charm and moved through the office with confidence, engaging warmly with nearly everyone, that is, except for me. I couldn't quite understand why, but she seemed to take an immediate dislike to me. Within just 2 weeks, whatever minimal interaction we had disappeared entirely. She stayed focused on her tasks, and I stuck to mine. At first I made a real effort to understand what I might have done to provoke her coldness, but I came up empty. I wasn't impolite. I treated her with courtesy. Unlike many around us, I didn't go out of my way to win her over or flatter her. As I quietly watched her from a distance, I began to see how intelligent she was, with a dry wit that made others laugh. She was clearly capable and deeply invested in her work. People respected both her professionalism and her looks. I, on the other hand, maintained a quiet detachment that didn't go unnoticed. Colleagues even pointed out that she spoke with everyone, except me. Our job involved steering official documents through the complex web of international approvals. It required careful coordination with different countries, demanding, but often quite rewarding. Eventually, I gave up trying to change things. She lived in her own self-contained world, and I settled into mine, mentally and even physically. Eventually, we stopped exchanging even basic greetings. There were no more good mornings when the day began, or good nights as we left. Everyone else in the office maintained a cordial and professional atmosphere. We all helped each other out when needed. One weekend, Molly came to visit, and we went to my usual local hangout, an unassuming bar just outside Shape's rear entrance. We were enjoying shawarma and a couple of glasses of wine when Ingrid walked in with another Danish officer. We both made it clear, through silence and lack of eye contact, that we intended to ignore each other. After about an hour, Molly and I made our way back to my apartment, where she spent the night. My grandmother had long hoped that Molly and I would eventually get married. That never happened. Our relationship lasted about 9 pleasant months before it faded on its own. Meanwhile, Wesley was still in Ireland, wanting to return to the U.S., but hesitant to leave Stella behind. Karen wasn't thrilled about the idea of her son coming back either, but he was determined to live on his own terms. Stella didn't want to be apart from him, so she made the decision to move back to the States as well. I had the honor of standing as best man at their wedding, which took place in Clifton. Molly came too, accompanied by her new partner, whom she introduced to me. Around that time, I began to feel ready to head home myself. So I did. I took 2 weeks' leave and flew back. Just a week into the trip, I already found myself missing Belgium. Once I returned to Shape, I learned that one of our Turkish colleagues was wrapping up his 3-year post and heading home. To see him off, a group of us gathered at a bar near the gate for a farewell toast. The place was packed with people. We raised our glasses to his service, and he handed out boxes of Turkish delight, chewy, sugary treats from his country. Working in such a multicultural environment was a privilege. Many of my co-workers welcomed me into their homes, where I met their families and enjoyed meals from their cultures. Nearly every week brought a new invitation. I was living in the bachelor officers' quarters, my own private room. Ingrid also stayed in the same building, though on a different floor and at the opposite end, which meant we rarely saw each other. There was a communal kitchen, but I usually chose to eat at the officers' club or the main HQ cafeteria. The smells coming from that kitchen were a mixed bag, some appetizing, others downright strange or unpleasant. The base had a modest shopping complex, including a grocery store called Bon Marché, which loosely meant a good bargain. It was surprisingly well stocked, carrying products from every NATO country. At the Turkish officers' farewell event, I slipped out early since I had an important meeting the next morning. I didn't make a fuss, just left quietly, the way people sometimes do when they don't want to draw attention. The following day, the meeting went straight through to noon. I barely had time to grab my notes before heading to lunch. As I was finishing up in the cafeteria, Ingrid walked past with another female officer I didn't recognize. To my surprise, she stopped at my table. With thinly veiled sarcasm, she quipped, "Your predecessor never ghosted a party early." Reflexively, I stood and replied with a polite smile. "Maybe he didn't have a morning briefing to prepare for," I said. Or maybe being ready wasn't high on his list. Then I added, "Enjoy your lunch, Captain Bungard," and sat down again. I didn't watch her walk away, though I had plenty of times before, always struck by the way she carried herself, feelings about her swirling in quiet contradiction. What did I feel about her? Honestly, I couldn't say. I didn't dislike her, but I couldn't say I liked her either. The truth was, she hadn't given me the space to find out. Back then, I was probably still the lowest-ranking officer at Shape. I used to joke privately that some admin clerk in Washington had made a mistake placing me there, and probably caught hell for it. By the time my first year wrapped up, besides Molly, I'd crossed paths with women from Portugal, Italy, Greece, the UK, and the United States. At the BOQ, it didn't take long for people to start noticing how often I went out on dates. They had no problem making remarks about the steady stream of women I was seeing. Even the trio of Italian officers, who had quite the reputation as the most charismatic bachelors around, took to calling me Farfallone. I'd later find out it was their term for someone who flutters from one woman to another, a bit of a playboy. Truthfully, I took it in stride. It felt more like flattery than anything else. Being in a diverse international setting came with perks, and the BOQ was a magnet for unattached officers from all over. The building hosted personnel from 9 different countries, creating a lively, intercultural environment. It was the kind of place where customs were exchanged naturally, with no awkwardness. Take Halloween, for instance. Though distinctly American, it was a massive hit, especially with the children. My married co-workers, who lived with their families in base housing, genuinely enjoyed seeing kids from various backgrounds dressed in elaborate costumes, going door to door for treats. Another crowd favorite was Oktoberfest. Originating in Germany, it became an eagerly anticipated event full of spirited energy and communal fun. Thanksgiving didn't quite translate. Its cultural weight was a bit too specific to Americans for others to fully connect with. But Christmas? That was a different story. Christmas transcended borders. I had briefly considered flying home for the holidays, but in the end, I chose a more convenient option. A weekend getaway to Nuremberg with a German naval officer who also stayed at the BOQ. Nuremberg's Christmas market was like something lifted straight from a storybook. Nestled in the city's medieval core, it sparkled with lights, cozy vendor stalls, seasonal treats, and an atmosphere that radiated festive charm. If the British are known for their pomp and ceremony, then the Germans truly shine when it comes to festive celebrations. The weekend turned out to be unforgettable, just the right prelude to the holiday season. Wanting to avoid the chaos of peak travel, I decided to remain at Shape for the rest of the holidays. Things at the base wound down dramatically, with operations nearly halting altogether in the days leading up to Christmas. Still, every office needed someone present each day, except on Christmas Day itself. To assign shifts fairly, our department head used a simple lottery system. One hat for names, another for weekdays. A day would be drawn first, followed by a name to pair with it. My name was pulled for Tuesday. Ingrid was assigned to Thursday. Since Friday was Christmas, it was exempt from the draw. Curiously, one of the British officers dodged the entire process. His name never came up, effectively giving him the entire week off. The rest of us only had to report on our designated days. At one point, I overheard Ingrid say she was hoping to travel home, but being scheduled on Thursday would make that impossible. I didn't want her to feel pressured to trade shifts with me or feel like she owed me a favor. Even though it wouldn't have been a big deal, I didn't want to create any emotional entanglements. Instead, I saw a way to help everyone. If I took the whole week, it would free up my colleagues to spend the holidays with their families stress-free. So I paid a visit to the department head. "I don't have anywhere to be over the break," I told him. "Why not let the rest of the team have the week off? Things are going to be slow anyway. I can handle it." He studied me for a second. "You're sure about that?" "Completely, just one favor." "What's that?" "Don't tell anyone I volunteered. Just say it's all been sorted out." He gave me another look. "You're absolutely sure?" "I am, sir." That Friday, just before everyone wrapped up for the day, he stepped out and made an announcement. "There's been a change of plans," he said. "With most senior leadership out, we're not expecting anything urgent. Go ahead and take the full week. Enjoy your time off and have a wonderful Christmas." Cheers erupted across the office. Someone popped open a bottle of champagne and handed out glasses. We toasted, exchanged holiday greetings, and began packing up. Ingrid gave everyone hugs as she said goodbye, and when she got to me, she offered a sincere Merry Christmas. I smiled and wished her the same. One by one, they filed out. Once the room was nearly empty, the boss came over to where I was sitting. "Too late to back out now," he joked, nodding toward the door. "They've all gone." I chuckled. "No regrets? I'm actually looking forward to the quiet." He set his cap down on the edge of my desk and leaned against it. "Tell me something. What's going on between you and Bungard?" I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not sure I follow." "She's perfectly cordial until you're around. Then something shifts. Not hostile exactly, but definitely different. You ever notice that?" I gave a slight shrug. "Honestly, we've barely said more than a handful of words to each other since I arrived. Well, shortly after you showed up, she asked for a transfer back to Denmark. Her supervisor held off as long as possible, but they eventually found someone to fill her spot. She'll be leaving by mid-January." I paused before responding. "Like I said, I really don't know what's behind it. She's sharp. It's a loss for the team." That Tuesday, the office was deserted except for me. A Danish officer dropped by and gave me a nod of acknowledgement. "Let me guess," he said. "You drew duty today?" I stood and gave a respectful, "Yes, sir." "And when's Captain Bungard scheduled to work?" "She's off the whole week, sir." "The entire week?" "Yes, sir, everyone is." "So what's your day off?" "Friday, sir." It was Christmas Day. I had just moved to sit down when he began to walk off, but then he paused and glanced back at me. I rose again. His gaze swept over me from head to toe, then he turned and continued on his way. That happened right after Thursday's lunch. Later, I was at my desk, going through a stack of mundane paperwork, double-checking everything to be sure nothing was overlooked. Without warning, the door burst open. I looked up and, to my surprise, saw a German admiral, a 4-star, walking directly toward me. "Merry Christmas, Lieutenant," he said warmly, extending his hand. I stood up immediately, setting aside my work to greet him. "Why don't you pack it up and head home?" he suggested. "That sounds like a great idea, sir," I responded. "Then do it," he said, already turning away. I followed behind as he made his way down the hall, stopping in each office along the way, spreading Christmas cheer with a hearty smile and a friendly greeting. At SHAPE, there were 3 officers of that rank. The Supreme Allied Commander Europe, General Saussure, was American. His deputy, also a DeSantis, was British. The Chief of Staff was the German admiral who'd just visited me. I had met all of them before and participated in several meetings with them, so I recognized the COS right away. Each of these men held enormous stature within their own militaries and were regarded internationally as exemplary leaders. That year, Christmas fell on a Friday. I spent the day in the BOC with a small group of others who, like me, hadn't left for the holiday. The weekend was uneventful. Things picked up again Sunday night as personnel started filtering back in. Being stationed in Europe often reminded me how different it is from the US. From our base in Belgium, a road trip to Rome would take about 15 hours and pass through parts of Germany, France, and Switzerland. Compare that to Texas. Driving across it on I-10 can take nearly 13 hours, and that's just one state. For many stationed at SHAPE, going home for the weekend was actually doable. By Monday morning, spirits were high. Most people were genuinely happy to be back at work. The job was interesting and meaningful, which made a real difference. We spent much of that morning sharing how we'd spent the holiday. When it came around to me, I didn't have much to say. I told them I'd spoken with my mother and my best friend. During our call, I found out his wife was expecting a child. That was the biggest news I had to offer. "Weren't you with Kristen?" asked Tobias, a captain from the UK. Kristen, a German Navy officer I'd been seeing, and I had once traveled to Nuremberg together. As he brought her up, I noticed Ingrid glance away and quietly turn her back. "No," I said. "She spent the holiday with her family." That sparked a conversation about how different cultures celebrate the holidays. Ingrid remained by the window, silent, watching the world outside. When someone invited her to join in, she politely excused herself and left the room. Not long after, an Italian officer shifted the mood with a blunt question. How many women had I slept with over the break? The topic spiraled from there, a running tally of how many dates I'd been on since arriving at SHAPE, along with remarks about the reputation I had apparently developed as something of a womanizer. The conversation only cooled down once Ingrid returned. New Year's Eve came quickly, and the number of events was dizzying. I received 7 invitations and accepted 2. I made it to the first party but never got around to attending the second. The first was non-negotiable. Hosted by our department head, it was technically mandatory. About 30 people turned up. The setting was surreal, a castle, a real one, leased by our boss and his wife as their home for a 3-year period. It even featured a functioning moat. In addition to our department staff and a few spouses, there were friends and extended family in attendance. Most of the guests were familiar faces from work. One of them I had dated briefly, but since she came with a date, I kept my distance. I danced with 3 other women, chatted with all my colleagues, and eventually spotted Ingrid across the room, standing with an older couple. My boss and his wife made their way around the room, stopping to talk with everyone. When they reached me, we exchanged a few warm words before they moved along. The atmosphere was vibrant, a blend of personalities and cultures that made for a memorable evening. Just before midnight, around 11:20, the anticipation for the countdown was building. That's when the older gentleman who had been with Ingrid approached me. His English was hesitant. "Excuse me," he said softly. "I do not speak your language well." He hesitated, clearly searching for the right words. "I do not always understand anything. But I know this. She is right. You upset her." He paused again, this time with a firmer tone. "Please, do not hurt my Ingrid anymore." Just then, Ingrid appeared beside him. She gently took his hand and said something to him in Danish as she led him away. As they walked off, he looked over his shoulder and mumbled something I couldn't quite catch. A moment later, I felt a hand on my shoulder. "What did you say to him?" Tobias asked. "Nothing," I replied. "I don't even know who he is." "Well, I do," Tobias said. "That's Ingrid's father. And I think he just told you to leave." "Leave? Leave what? Why?" Tobias chuckled. "Relax, mate. I'm just looking for my wife. I need to find her before midnight. She's an excellent kisser." He laughed and wandered off. I didn't stick around to see the clock strike 12. Something told me that if Ingrid's father spotted me again, he wouldn't hesitate to ask me to leave. Again. Things could have escalated into something far more embarrassing, and in front of everyone, no less. He seemed relaxed enough at the time, but I couldn't predict how he might behave if he drank more and bumped into me again. I offered my farewell one last time, this time using Irish. Like Christmas, New Year's Eve landed on a Friday that year. I didn't return to the office until the following Monday. I was the first to arrive that morning. The boss showed up not long after. I thanked him for the invitation and told him how much I'd enjoyed the gathering. Being German, he appreciated the opportunity to connect across cultures, and we chatted for a while about how refreshing it had been to mix with such a broad range of people. Ingrid was the last to come in. As usual, she strolled past the desks, giving everyone a bright "good morning," everyone but me. The boss soon called her into his office. Their meeting didn't last long. When they emerged, he addressed the whole team. Ingrid, he announced, would be transferred. She'd be leaving in 2 weeks, once someone had been brought in to take her place. Until then, nothing about our work routines would change. Also, as many already knew, Captain DeSantis was scheduled to return to Italy at the end of the month. His replacement would be arriving the following week. There were a lot of moving parts, he said, but we needed to keep focused. With that, we got back to business. I returned to my duties, at least until Ingrid passed by. I couldn't help but glance up and watch her walk away, for what must have been the 1,000th time. I'd miss that view, I admitted to myself, but I definitely wouldn't miss how she treated me. This past week had been especially tense. It felt like she was putting effort into making her contempt obvious. She used to just act like I didn't exist. But that passive behavior had evolved into something more intentional, borderline hostile. She'd start chatting with a colleague and lean against the edge of my desk, her back to me, carrying on as if I were invisible. Over time, I'd come to understand that while workplace rudeness might vary culturally, outright disrespect was never acceptable. Every desk had the standard setup: inbox, outbox, papers, reports. I finally spoke up. "Excuse me, could you not sit on my desk?" She didn't reply, but did stand up, still deep in conversation with Tobias, a British colleague. Tobias glanced over her shoulder at me, caught my eye, and gave a tiny eye roll that almost became a grin. The next day I got a call. "Lieutenant Parker speaking. This is Captain Annika Nielsen from the travel office. Would you have time for a coffee? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." "The travel office? I'm not scheduled for any trips. Please, Lieutenant, meet me at the cafeteria at 10. "How will I recognize you?" "No need, I'll recognize you." The moment I entered the cafeteria, she approached without hesitation. "Lieutenant Parker." Her tone made it clear she already knew who I was. "Can I call you Philip?" "Phil works." Perfect, I'm Annika. Shall we grab some coffee? What's this about? Coffee first. We got our drinks, picked a table, and sat. For a while, we just sat in silence. Well, I watched her while she quietly studied me, which made me a little uneasy. I finally broke the stillness. Captain Nielsen? Annika, please. All right, Annika, do you know what the word doppelganger means? I do, she said with a nod. I only came across the term recently, maybe a month ago. My husband and I arrived here in early December. Not long after we settled in, we went to a Danish event at the Officers Club and met Ingrid Bungard. She and I hit it off instantly. It felt like meeting a long-lost sister. We've had plenty of conversations since then, even shared personal things. She gave me this, Annika said, handing me a photograph. I examined it, and the longer I looked, the more startled I became. It was like staring into a mirror. If I had a twin brother, the resemblance wouldn't be stronger. Who is this? I asked. That's Ingrid's former fiancé. Just before she got posted here, he ended their engagement and walked away. That revelation explained a great deal, especially one very important detail. And with that single truth, everything else began to make sense. She was completely thrown off when she first saw you, Annika continued. You reminded her of him immediately, and it triggered something. Even the little things, how you move, your habits, those similarities got under her skin, like how you twirl your pencil when you're on the phone. I do that, I admitted, slightly embarrassed. So did Finn, her ex. She's noticed everything about you more than you think, and it's been difficult for her. She originally thought she could just ignore it, push through, but instead, it's only gotten more difficult. Even though she really enjoys being at Shape, she's requested a transfer because of you. Annika paused, took a sip of coffee, then added, She feels bad for how she's treated you, truly. But the reality is, her anger at him has found a new target in you. Why didn't she just talk to me about it? She wanted to, Annika said gently. But with every day that passed, it got harder to bring up. I think deep down, you already sensed that, didn't you? Yes. And then it spiraled further because she began blaming herself for not stepping in sooner. After that, her anger shifted toward you, toward your very identity, which, to her, seemed unjust. But hear me. This was never your burden to carry. It's entirely hers. I get that. I'm well aware I'm not the one at fault, but still, you've got to do something for her. What are you talking about? You need to help her stop drowning in this guilt. If she leaves things like this, she'll never shake the shame. It'll follow her for years. Why should that be my concern? She spent a whole year acting like I didn't matter. Never once did she ask how I was doing. And what are you even doing here? Did she send you to plead her case? No, she didn't send me. She wouldn't, and honestly, she probably never will. I'm here because I care about her. You've known her, what, 4 weeks? What kind of bond can even grow in that short a time? When grief enters the picture, friendships grow quickly. Ingrid is in pain. She's devastated by the way she acted toward you. And she's also mourning the fact that she has no one to blame but herself. Well, that's her mess to clean up. Let her sit with it. I'm not here to make her feel better. Now, if you don't mind, I've got things to do. I stood and made my way to the office. Just as I reached the door, I spotted Ingrid coming down the hallway from the opposite side. Normally, I'd hold the door open for someone else to enter first, but not this time. I pushed through without looking at her. It made my blood boil, being expected to ease her guilt when she was the one who treated me like I didn't exist. The day crept by. I buried myself in files I wouldn't need until next week. Occasionally, I glanced in her direction. A couple of times, I could swear she was watching me too. Forget it. I picked up the receiver and called Kristen to see if she was free for dinner. She wasn't. Somehow, the whole office overheard the call, and it morphed into a group conversation. I used it as a way to coast through the rest of the afternoon until I could reasonably call it quits. Once at BOQ, I shot off a recap email to Wesley about the day's drama. His reply came back within minutes. He was practically cackling. He already knew all about Ingrid and loved to tease me about the so-called crush he insisted I had on her. I told him to get lost. Over here, people eat dinner later than back home, so by the time I sat down at the officers' club, it was almost 8 p.m. I had just picked up the menu when she appeared beside my table. "Would you mind if I joined you?" she asked. I didn't even think twice. Actually, I do mind. I'd rather not share a meal with someone who acts like I'm invisible. Go find someone else to unload your attitude on. I met her gaze and held it. She stood there silently for a few seconds before finally saying, "You're right. I came to apologize. I've been projecting someone I resent onto you and treating you like you are that person. That wasn't okay. I'm sorry." Then she turned and walked away. On her final day in the office, she came around to say goodbye. She hugged people, kissed cheeks in the usual European style, and everyone gathered to tell her how much they'd miss her. I stayed put, pretending to be engrossed in my work. Once she'd made the rounds, she approached my desk. Without a word, she placed a single flower on the corner of it. Then she walked out. The room fell silent. All eyes shifted toward me. Tobias, the British guy, came over. "You know what that is?" he asked. I looked up. "Not really. It's a lily of the valley. It's often given when someone's seeking forgiveness." He gave me a small, knowing smile. "I've given a fair few of those to my wife." I picked up the flower and brought it close to my face. The next year flew past. Kristen and I started seeing each other until her rotation ended. Then she went back to Germany, technically to a German naval vessel, not the country itself. I spent 2 weeks traveling around Europe with Wesley, Stella, and their little boy Philip, named after me, incidentally, after we first stopped to visit Grandma Karen in Clifton. Spring had just begun, and I was down to my final few months stationed at Shape. I kept up a light friendship with Annika Nielsen. We'd meet for coffee here and there. One afternoon, she rang me. "Just wanted to give you a heads up. I heard Ingrid's coming back on Monday." She explained that Ingrid would be there for a planning session that week and had asked whether I was still around. When Annika told her I was, Ingrid wanted to know if I might be willing to meet for coffee. I thought about that flower, the lily of the valley. "Yeah," I said. "Tell her I'm in." "I'll let her know," Annika said. A few hours later, she called again. "They land Monday morning. Her first meeting's at 1. How does 11 o'clock coffee sound?" "Sounds fine," I said. When we met, the conversation started off stiff and uncomfortable. Neither of us knew how to begin. The silence stretched on. But by noon, the tension had started to ease. We even managed to laugh a little. She had just begun telling me about her split with her fiancé when she suddenly remembered she was late. Back at the office, Ingrid's replacement had already settled in, another captain, though this time a man. Aside from him, I was now the longest-serving person there. Although I had been assigned to Shape longer than he had, he outranked me. Most of the others were captains or majors. I was still wearing lieutenant bars, recently promoted to first lieutenant. With the day's work behind me, I made my way to the officers' club to relax before dinner. I was just about to place a drink order when Ingrid came in, scanned the crowd, spotted me, and walked over. I rose from my seat as she approached. "There's a small reception happening in one of the side rooms," she said. "It's almost over. Want to grab a drink when it wraps up?" "I'd like that," I replied. Later that evening, she opened up to me with a story that closely mirrored something Annika Nielsen had once told me about her former fiancé. "I was so upset and treated you badly," she confessed. "I really owe you an apology. I completely overreacted and ended up making a fool of myself." During her stay, we spent nearly every free moment together. It was a wonderful week, until the last night before her return to Denmark. "This week has meant a great deal to me," she said, "but I can't help regretting all the time we wasted back when we were stationed here. There's something I need to tell you." "Go ahead," I said. "You might be wondering whether I think about my ex-fiancé when I'm with you. Honestly, I've asked myself that too. I don't think I do, but you remind me of him so much. I loved him deeply, and the resemblance between you two is striking. It's been on my mind a lot. The last thing I wanted was to feel like a substitute for someone else. But the truth was, I could never be absolutely sure. That doubt, however small, might always be there. Regardless, I knew this week would probably be our last together. I was due to transfer back to the States in just a few months. When we said goodbye, she gave me a customary kiss on the cheek and a sincere farewell. I finished out the remainder of my 3-year post and returned to the U.S. I took a month of leave before starting my new assignment at the Pentagon, stepping into a role much like the one I'd held in Belgium. Once again, I found myself the lowest-ranking officer in the unit. I even questioned whether a mistake had been made. My supervisor checked with HR to be sure. "They got it right," he said. "Lieutenant Parker, it looks like someone's invested in your future." He went on. "From SHAPE to the Pentagon, someone's clearly tracking your progress. Keep your performance strong, stay out of trouble, and get started on your master's degree. You're being groomed for advancement. What you need now is leadership experience." So I settled into the routine, shuttling between the office and my room at the bachelor officers' quarters. Eventually, I opted to rent a home of my own. I furnished it piece by piece, and after years of cramped BOQ living, having a spacious place to myself was a welcome change. Work kept me busy, but the pace allowed enough time to decompress. After about 3 months, I realized that rest alone wasn't enough. I needed meaningful connection. The officers' club became my usual haunt, though options for socializing were slim. I ended up forming a connection with a senior officer, an older woman who outranked me by 2 grades and was 5 years ahead of me in age. We became close in a casual, comfortable way. Saturday nights became our shared ritual, time to relax and enjoy each other's company. It worked well for nearly a year. Then an old friend from the German Navy reached out. She was part of the crew on their training ship and told me they'd be stopping in Boston for a sailing expo, joined by U.S. naval trainees as well. She wondered if I was free to meet while they were in town. I agreed. We reunited over dinner and spent the night together. We stayed in touch while her vessel remained in port. Then 6 more months passed. Things were going smoothly. Wesley, Stella, and my godson Philip were doing well, and we stayed connected with regular visits. Wesley, in particular, remained my closest friend. My weekend companionship continued, and life settled into a predictable rhythm. Then Wesley called with news. They were moving back to Ireland. His grandmother's health was declining, and she wanted to spend time with him. He asked if I'd consider coming along. Sensing the importance, I arranged a 2-week leave. On a whim, I contacted my former office at SHAPE to see if any of my old colleagues were still there. 2 of them were. I asked if one of them could reach out to the Danish Army liaison office and try to get a message to Ingrid. If they couldn't share her contact details, I left mine, hoping it would be passed along. 2 days later, my phone rang in the office. It was her. A Danish colleague had relayed my Pentagon extension. When I picked up and heard her voice, I froze for a second. "I wasn't sure you'd even remember me," I said. She laughed. "Of course I remember you. I actually tried getting your number from SHAPE's communications office a few times, but they wouldn't give it out." We caught up on our lives but carefully avoided discussing romantic relationships. I mentioned that I'd be in Ireland for 2 weeks. "Could you come to Denmark?" she asked. "I'd really love to see you." After some discussion, we agreed to meet in Copenhagen. After spending a few days with Wesley and his family in Clifton, I boarded a plane bound for Copenhagen. I had intended to stay just 2 days, but those plans quickly unraveled, and I ended up staying a full week. She met me at the airport looking mostly the same, though something in her demeanor had brightened, a subtle glow that hadn't been there before. "Oddly enough, Philip, you were on my mind. Not the man who merely resembles you, the one we silently agreed never to speak of." We stopped speaking for a while and simply looked at one another. "Do you remember when I started seeing you differently?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not really." "It was during that Christmas," she said. "You offered to work someone else's shift so they could go home. I heard it was because you found out I wouldn't be able to make it back otherwise." "That wasn't the only reason," I told her. "There were other things, too." "Like what?" I asked. "That party," she said. "The one where my dad talked to you. I'd gone home for Christmas, and they returned with me for New Year's. She described how she had already told them about me. At the party, after pointing me out, her father, tipsy and protective, decided to approach me, hoping to scare me off. She apologized for what he'd done. I laughed and said, "Don't worry about it. He was just looking out for you." Although I'd only intended to visit for a short while, we were having such a good time that I kept delaying my departure. On our last night together, things turned physical. I wish I could say it was a perfect, unforgettable moment, but it wasn't. We were both anxious, pushing too hard to make it something special. It ended up feeling awkward. We'd both had better. Fortunately, we had time to find our rhythm. For nearly 2 years, we took turns crossing the Atlantic to see each other. By the time my Pentagon assignment wrapped up 3 years later, I received new orders, a transfer to Germany. I sold my house, boxed up everything, and moved. With a promotion to captain under my belt, I took up a post at EU-Sur-AUR, the U.S. Army Europe's command center. I remembered my Pentagon supervisor's words about needing command experience, and now I had it. I was named Garrison Commander, a job usually reserved for a major. But as a captain, I stepped in. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying. Ingrid had returned to shape, and we spent nearly every weekend together. The relationship grew stronger, and I never minded the hours-long train or car ride it took to reach her. After a year or so, she got appointed as the Danish Army liaison to USAREUR, and we decided to live together. We even began talking seriously about getting married. Then, just as we were settling in, the call came. My time in Heidelberg was up, and I was being deployed to Afghanistan. We weighed our choices, said our goodbyes through tears, and I left. Just a month later, I found myself back in Germany, though I had no memory of returning. I was unconscious in a military hospital, held in a coma. When I finally came to, Ingrid was at my side, holding my hand. She slowly filled in the details. An explosion had torn through the vehicle I was in. There were 6 of us. 4 died on impact. Only the driver and I survived, and just barely. The doctors were considering amputating my left leg below the knee, but they hadn't accounted for Ingrid, who, fluent in several languages, refused to accept that course of action without a fight. She argued fiercely until they agreed to wait, giving me the final say. When I was lucid enough to decide, I chose to keep the leg, even knowing it would be mangled, disfigured, and that I'd forever walk with a limp. As I told the doctors, Ingrid gripped my hand and said with a smile, "He can still dance with a limp, just not without a leg." That caught me off guard. We'd only danced a handful of times. I looked at her, confused. She leaned down and whispered, "I want us to be dancing for a long, long time." Then she kissed me. I spent another month in rehab. She never missed a day, always there, lifting me up, cheering me on, refusing to let me give in. Eventually, I had to return to the U.S. for further treatment, tests, and to determine if I'd be medically retired. I fought to finish rehab in Germany instead, and eventually won that battle. After 3 months and passing the Army's fitness test, the review board cleared me to stay on active duty. I resumed a staff role at USAREUR. 2 months later, in Copenhagen, Wesley stood beside me as my best man. Ingrid and I were married. Her father, in shaky English, said he was grateful I wasn't Havik. We remained in Germany for another 2 years. We wanted longer, but she was obligated to return to Denmark. No job opened up for me there, so I returned to the U.S. We didn't see one another for 3 months. Then I flew to Copenhagen for a surprise visit, something I usually avoided. This time, I made an exception. I shouldn't have. When I knocked on her door, a man answered. His face said everything. I understood just enough Danish to catch his shocked whisper, "Oh my God." We stood there, motionless, eyes locked. Finally, I asked, "Ingrid?" I tried to step past him, but he blocked the way. "She's not here," he said. Where is she? I pushed past him and scanned the apartment. He trailed me, trying to stop me, speaking in a mix of broken Danish and English. I wasn't listening. I needed to see her. The bedroom door stood open. I moved toward it. He darted in front and slammed it shut, positioning himself like a barrier. I recognized the room. I'd helped her move in. I already knew what was behind that door. A noise came from inside the room. He turned sharply, squinting at the door like he could will it transparent. I brushed past him in silence, yanked the door open, and stepped in just as someone ducked into the bathroom, the door clicking shut with a decisive snap of the lock. I knocked, hard. Ingrid. Silence. Ingrid, open the door. I'm giving you 10 seconds. I started counting aloud. Behind me, he was still shaking, but I ignored him. When I got to 10 with no reply, I gave up. I turned toward the entryway, grabbed my bag, and was reaching for the handle when the front door opened. There was a man standing there. An hour after that, I was already at the airport. The same plane that had dropped me off had been refueled, cleaned, and was now boarding again for the return leg. I'd barely spent 3 hours in Copenhagen. Only business class was left, but I didn't care. I handed over my card, took the boarding pass, moved through immigration, and got my exit stamp from an officer who didn't even raise his eyes. I made my way to the gate, and within 15 minutes I was back in my seat. That's when the phone began to buzz. Ingrid was calling. I let it ring. When I got home, I headed straight for the bedroom, collapsed face down on the bed, and blacked out. I'd crossed the Atlantic twice in a single day, only to uncover a betrayal I hadn't suspected when I left. I passed out instantly, still in my travel clothes, shoes and all. When I finally woke, I stripped off the wrinkled clothes, used the bathroom, shaved, and took the long overdue shower I'd been needing since I left for Denmark. My phone was filled with messages from Ingrid. I erased them all without opening any. 3 months before all this, I'd come back to the States and taken a new post at the Pentagon, same role I'd held before. Aside from my stint leading a unit in Germany, I'd settled comfortably into my place as an ops officer. It was the niche I'd found in the Army. I was also still working through grad school part-time, about a year out from earning the degree. The morning after returning from Europe, I showed up at the office unannounced. My co-workers were surprised to see me so soon, and I knew questions were coming. I didn't dodge them. I told the truth. They gave me condolences, and then we all just got back to the grind. I buried myself in work, not sure whether I was trying to keep busy or prove something, maybe both. 2 days later, as I got off the elevator and walked toward my apartment, I heard shouting. Ingrid's voice, sharp, furious, and unmistakably Danish, echoed down the corridor. She accused me of being ungrateful, of not trusting her enough to let her explain. She hurled curses in multiple languages. I couldn't identify most, though the English ones stung clearly. Neighbors cracked open their doors, drawn by the shouting. Eventually, she switched to English. She flung her passport at my chest. It hit me and fell to the floor. "You don't believe me?" she snapped. "Look!" I picked it up. She snatched it back, flipped quickly through the pages, and stabbed a finger at one of the stamps. "What do you see?" If you've ever crossed borders, you know customs stamps your passport at entry and exit. The one she pointed to showed she'd entered the UK 3 days before I landed in Denmark. She grabbed it again, flipped a few more pages, and held another one out to me. Now, this time it showed she'd left the UK the day before I arrived in Denmark. Still not done, she turned to the last page and shoved it toward me. The final stamp said she had landed in the US that very day. "So go to hell," she hissed. "I'm done, and I never want to see you again." She spun around, grabbed her suitcase and backpack from beside the door, and marched toward the elevator. I ran after her, pleading for her to stop, to talk for even a moment. She didn't say a word. We waited for the elevator in silence while I begged. She stood like stone. When the doors opened, she stepped inside, dropped her bags to block the entrance, and stood in my way. I tried to squeeze past her, but she shoved me out just as the doors began to close. I bolted for the stairs, 5 flights down, But when I reached the lobby, she was gone. I stood there, panting, reeling. What the hell had just happened? If she'd still been in the UK, she couldn't have been in that apartment. So who had I seen, and why? I tried calling her, again and again, left messages, apologies, desperate pleas just to talk. Nothing. Eventually, I called Wesley and laid it all out. He didn't sugarcoat it. According to him, European women weren't like Americans. He said if an American woman gets hurt or misunderstood, she might cry and leave. She might hold a grudge. But European women? Different. His wife, Stella, he said, wouldn't just walk away. She'd come after you. Ingrid, he guessed, had flown straight from England just to prove me wrong. That kind of rage, Wesley said, doesn't fade fast, and I doubt this is the end of it. His advice was blunt. Stay still. Say nothing. Let time do its work. If you're lucky, he said, she might forgive you. But you messed up. You jumped to the worst conclusion and never gave her the chance to explain. That's strike two. Then he paused. And she doesn't know a damn thing about baseball, so don't expect a third. I've been thinking about getting in touch with her. If you do, brace yourself for whatever comes next. She's still dealing with everything, and reaching out might only reopen wounds. Maybe giving her space is the better call. She might see it as me doing nothing. Or she might see it as you respecting her boundaries. Could go either way. Just know it could blow up. Either path carries risk. Whatever happens, you know I've got your back. And I believed him. He'd been by my side for years. A full month passed with no response from her. Not a word. I figured if divorce papers were coming, they'd be processed in Copenhagen. Our wedding took place there. Then an idea hit me. It took 3 days, but I arranged for a single lily of the valley to be delivered to her apartment in Copenhagen. A week passed, then 2. By the 3rd week, still no word from Ingrid. I tried calling. Every time it rang unanswered. Eventually, I decided to visit the JAG office. They handle military legal matters. I knew they couldn't represent me in a civilian divorce, but I was hoping for some guidance. A major explained that because our marriage happened in Denmark, any legal action would have to be initiated there. Since she wasn't picking up the phone, I sent an email instead. I told her I'd go along with whatever she decided. I just needed clarity. 2 more weeks slipped by without a reply. Then, in the 3rd week, something changed. Physical mail had become nearly obsolete in my life. I rarely got anything but spam or administrative notices. So when the envelope arrived, I knew immediately it was something different. Inside was the official divorce paperwork, both the Danish original and an English translation. Tucked between the pages was a note written in her hand. Philip, I've spent a lot of time reflecting. I've come to believe that our marriage was a mistake. You didn't even try to uncover the truth about who was in my apartment. You just assumed the worst. That hurt more than I can explain. Sign the documents. Let's end this. Ingrid. Clearly the flower hadn't changed anything. I signed the forms and sent them back. Not long after, my supervisor called me into his office. Captain Parker, General Thompson's been promoted to Lieutenant General and is relocating to Italy. He's asked for a new adjutant and requested you by name. He's reviewed your work and wants a meeting. What do you think? Honestly, I'm not sure. You could always decline. I'm not sure I want to. In that case, your meeting's at 900 tomorrow. Make sure your uniform is squared away. That last part was classic him, his usual send-off when someone was meeting with a general. The meeting went smoothly. A month later, I was on a flight to Italy, officially appointed as the new aide to Lieutenant General William G. Thompson. With the role came an unexpected promotion to major. It's rare for a captain to move up that quickly, unless, of course, a 3-star general is pulling the strings. Life as a general's adjutant doesn't offer much personal time. Most evenings were booked with official functions, many of which required my presence alongside the general and his wife. We've now been in Italy for 4 months. Aside from Sundays, I haven't had a single full day off. The military world is small, and the longer you serve, the more familiar faces resurface. During lunch one day at the officers' club, while General Thompson was hosting a private dinner, I ran into 2 officers I knew from our days at SHAPE. They spotted me in the mess and joined my table. We swapped stories, caught up on who had transferred where. "Remember that stunning Danish captain you used to work with?" one of them asked. "She's a major now, and apparently married to an American named Parker. Lucky guy." They glanced at each other. "Hold on, that's not you, is it?" I gave a nod. "So you're the husband?" "Was the husband. We're divorced." "Well, I'll be damned." He paused. "Just out of curiosity, is she really as beautiful as everyone remembered?" "Jesus, Tony," the other one cut in. "You don't ask that about someone's ex-wife." "They're not together anymore. What's the big deal?" They went back and forth, neither letting it go. Eventually, Tony turned back to me. "So, what do you say, Phil?" I gave him a faint smile. "Think of the most breathtaking woman you've ever seen. Ingrid made her look plain." "Damn," he muttered. "So what happened?" I told them the story, every piece of it. "When's the last time you saw her?" one of them asked. "About 8 months ago." "Does she know you're stationed here?" "Highly doubtful. Last time we crossed paths was at the Pentagon." "Well, next week might be interesting for you." "Why's that?" "She's with the delegation flying in to brief command. They'll be here for a few days." "What delegation?" "The advance team prepping for the NATO exercise in 3 months." "That meeting isn't on General Thompson's schedule," I said, my tone even. "It's for the planning team only. He'll be updated once everything's finalized." The quiet that followed was thick, almost oppressive, as we idly moved our food around on our plates. My mind began to drift to unsettling possibilities. I debated whether it was worth trying to see her. We were just wrapping up lunch when word came through that the general had finished eating and was preparing to leave. I stepped outside to check that his vehicle and driver were standing by, then came back in just as he was offering his goodbyes. Once we were back at the office, I turned to the executive officer. "Do you have any details on the upcoming briefing?" "Just fragments," he said. "We got a preliminary memo, nothing actionable. The general knows it's coming, though. I thought about suggesting he meet the team ahead of time just to build rapport. Good optics, maybe." "Do you have a roster of who's on the team?" "Yeah, I've got it here." "Can I take a look?" He handed me the paper but gave me a curious look. "Sure. Why the sudden curiosity?" "My ex-wife might be on it." He grimaced. "Oof, that could get awkward." He passed me the list, and there it was. Second from the top. Deputy Team Lead, Major Ingrid Parker. I gave it back without comment. "Thanks. Planning to talk to her?" "Not unless it's necessary, probably not." "Should I give the general a heads up?" "Number, just let me know if he decides to meet with them. I'll handle the prep." The team arrived that Monday. They had a 2-hour session booked with the general's planning staff. General Thompson told his XO he'd drop by at 2:15 to greet them. The XO relayed that, and I headed to the general's office with the team list in hand. "Sir," I said, handing over the paper, "I thought I should mention, one of the people you'll meet this afternoon is my ex-wife." He looked at me for a beat, then glanced down at the list. "Let me guess, Parker?" A grin spread across his face. That's when I realized I'd underestimated how playful he could be. "First question," he said. "Are you two on good terms?" "Unlikely. We haven't spoken in months." "Well, that might work in our favor. Second question, does she know her stuff?" "She did, back when we worked together." He dug a little more into our history, then gave me a sly look. "Want to come with me? People tend to sit up straighter when you walk in with a 3-star. Could have an effect on her, too." I laughed. "Highly doubtful, but I'll get the door for you." At exactly 2:15, I opened the door to the conference room. The usher snapped to attention and called the room to stand. The general strode in, with me just behind. I stayed by the entrance while he moved confidently to the front of the room. His staff was seated along one side, the visiting team opposite. He took his chair, then gestured for the others to do the same. Everyone complied, except Ingrid. She paused briefly, met my eyes, and then sat. Even as the general gave his welcome remarks, I could sense her glancing at me from time to time. When he wrapped up, he asked each team member to introduce themselves. One after another, they stood and recited their name, rank, nationality, and command. When Ingrid's turn came, she rose, spoke clearly and professionally, and sat back down. Then the general spoke again. "Major Parker," he said, "I hear you're familiar with my adjutant, also Parker." She stood again. Yes, sir, we've met. Then she quickly returned to her seat. The general closed the meeting with polite formalities, expressing interest in their findings, and rose to leave. Everyone followed suit. The usher opened the door, and we exited side by side. Out in the corridor, he looked at me. Phil, you have a type. She's impressive. Yes, sir. He gave me a knowing smile. Would you go back if you had the chance? I think I would. Still have feelings? Yes, sir. Well, maybe this is your opportunity to find out where she stands. I don't know. Things ended badly. Each morning, I'd drive to the general's house in my own car. From there, his driver would take us to headquarters. In the evening, it was reversed. Drop off the general, return the vehicle to the motor pool, and I'd receive my next day's schedule before heading home. Evenings were different if the general had an event to attend, which happened often, usually 3 nights a week. I kept a small wardrobe at his house, including formal attire, in case plans shifted on short notice. That night we spoke briefly before I left in my car and drove to the officers' club for dinner. Inside the lobby, a board displayed the evening's events. At the top, a reception for the visiting SHAPE delegation. I paused, considering skipping it and eating in my quarters instead. The schedule was right there by the entrance. I barely made 2 steps before deciding to turn around, but I was already too late. Phil. As I turned around, a storm of memories surged through me. Everything led back to one pivotal mistake, mine. All that had unraveled since then could be traced to that single lapse in judgment. I had no excuses to offer, no one to fault but myself. Even her cold dismissal of my apology felt earned. Then I caught sight of her. Ingrid, heading out already? You just walked in. She nodded. Yeah, I noticed you had something on your agenda, so I didn't see a reason to stick around. Not even to say hello? I just did. I swallowed the rest of what I wanted to say, my feelings too raw, too volatile. We stood there in silence, looking at each other. I wanted to tell her I was sorry, but I couldn't read a thing in her expression. Before either of us could find the words, one of her colleagues appeared and gently directed her back toward the lobby. I turned and left alone, my appetite gone, not just for hot dogs, but for food in general. That would be the last time we spoke. Her team completed their assignment and flew back to SHAPE. The Friday after they left, a NATO courier arrived at my door carrying a package from Ingrid. Inside, there was an envelope addressed to my former Washington apartment, from the same office that had originally sent our divorce paperwork. My name had been crossed out in thick ink. Beside it, someone had scribbled, "Moved. Return to sender." The envelope was unopened. A slip of paper was taped to it. Phil, I had my attorney forward this to you, but it got sent back. Now I know why. Seeing you Monday caught me by surprise. Hope you're doing okay. Ingrid. I tore open the envelope. Inside were the legal documents I'd signed and sent back weeks earlier, but this time, something new had been added, a handwritten message from her. Phil, I couldn't go through with it. That's why I never filed. I think I still love you, even when I don't want to. If you feel the same, call me. Ingrid. I no longer had her personal number, but I remembered the contact for her office listed in the SHAPE directory. I dialed. She answered formally. Major Parker speaking. It's me, I said. I got the envelope. Her voice didn't change. And? I love you. There was a pause. Then I could hear the faintest smile in her reply. There's a 5 a.m. flight. If you'll have me, I'll be on it. What time does it land? I'll be waiting, she said. That evening, I rode home with the general and told him what had happened. He nodded with quiet approval. I'm happy for you. I really hope this turns out well. Take the weekend, even Monday, if you need it. Just let me know what's happening. When I arrived, I waited outside the arrivals corridor, unsure if I should make the first move. Maybe it was too soon, but I didn't have to decide. She ran toward me and leapt into my arms. We stayed locked in that embrace, blocking the narrow hall. Someone muttered something in Italian as they passed. What did he say? I asked. He told us to get a room, she replied with a laugh. We both laughed. On the way to the car, we held hands, somewhat awkwardly since mine was on the gear shift, but hers rested gently on top. We didn't need to speak. Just being near each other was enough. 10 seconds after we stepped through the door of my place, we were holding one another again. When we finally broke apart, I offered her something to eat or drink. We agreed on wine. I poured 2 glasses, and we clinked them quietly before sitting down on the couch. She took a breath. "We need to talk," she said, clearly unsure of where to begin. "I was so angry with you. I know I deserved it, I'm sorry. But when I saw you with him, I lost it. I wasn't thinking straight." "Same," she admitted. "When he called and told me you were there, I tried to reach out. I called, I messaged. You didn't respond. I thought you ignored me. It just made things worse. I was stuck on a mission, couldn't get away. The second I could, I flew home to find you. And when I got there, you weren't at the apartment. I couldn't get in. I waited for hours in the hallway, just stewing in it. I cried on the flight there. I cried flying back. I was furious. That's when I decided I was done. I told my sister," she added after a moment. "She tried to talk me down, but I wouldn't hear it." She paused, exhaling slowly. Then the signed papers came back. By that time, I'd cooled off a little. My sister, she's also my lawyer, and honestly smarter than me, hadn't filed anything yet. "She held on to them?" I asked. "She did. Said she wanted to give me time to think clearly. We had several conversations. Each time, I felt a little less angry. Eventually, I realized I didn't want to end it. I asked her to hold off. That's when she told me nothing had been filed. She was waiting on me." "Smart woman," I said. Ingrid gave a faint smile and took another sip of wine. "I tried calling you again, but by then I think you'd blocked my number. That hit hard. I thought, maybe you just didn't care, that you didn't want to fix it. What's the word? Reconcile? I had sent the papers to the last address I had for you, but they were returned. Apparently, you no longer lived there. I had no clue where you had gone or how to track you down." She paused briefly, her expression shifting. "And then, when I saw you walk in beside the general, I was completely stunned. I could hardly breathe. Yes, that's the word. Reconciliation. At first, all I could feel was resentment and confusion. I never agreed to a divorce. And once you got to D.C., I tried to reach you, called several times, but you never responded." She smiled faintly, almost apologetically. "I made a mess of that first year, no denying that. And this last one? Well, that was your turn. We can't let things spiral any further." We both laughed softly. "No, we truly can't, and we won't." I took a drink and asked, "So who was he and what was he doing there?" "He's technically my cousin. He and his wife were crashing at my place while their place was being redone. He opened the door, saw you standing there, and for a moment, mistook you for Finn. His English isn't the best, and he freaked out. Turns out, he had actually been at our wedding. Once he realized who you were, he tried to explain, but the language gap made it impossible. And you didn't give him a chance to say anything. He called me afterward, embarrassed he hadn't been able to clear things up." We sat in silence for a long time after that. I drained the last of my wine and headed to top it off. She noticed and held out her own empty glass. As I filled both, she reached into her bag, pulled something out, and returned to the couch. I handed her the wine and sat down next to her. She didn't drink. Instead, she placed her glass on the table and held something out to me, a dried blossom. "When I got this, I cried happy tears," she said softly. "It was the flower you'd sent. That weekend had been magical." On Sunday, I called the general to ask if I could take Monday off. He said yes, and suddenly, that amazing weekend turned into something unforgettable. I drove her to the airport that Monday afternoon. Working for a general meant long hours and barely any free time, but we made the most of it. Traveling back and forth between Belgium and Italy became a rhythm we both cherished. That went on for 4 months. Then, out of the blue, General Thompson asked to see me. "Phil, Esther and I are taking a couple of weeks off," he told me. We're heading to Cleveland. Her brother's health isn't great. We leave Friday. You should take some time off too. I'm sorry to hear about her brother, sir. It makes sense she'd want to be there, I replied. I was thinking of visiting Belgium, I added. No need, he said. I spoke with the general and arranged for Major Ingrid Parker to transfer to my team. She didn't want you to know, wanted to surprise you. She'll be here Friday. Frankie, Staff Sergeant Branford, will drive us to the airport. You stay here and wait for her, he finished. I thanked him and stepped out. As I walked into the main office, the manager, admin assistant, and secretary all looked up at me with amused, knowing smiles. I had been living in the bachelor officer quarters. It was practically home by then, but it wasn't a space fit for two people, so I checked in with housing to see what was available. As the general's adjutant, I was eligible for on-base housing. There was only one house left, on what they referred to as Colonel's Row. I wasn't a colonel, or even close, but they moved me in anyway. No one will question it. You're the adjutant, they reassured me. The house came furnished by the military, not luxurious but decent enough until Ingrid and I could add our own touch. It was Friday afternoon. The general and his wife had already departed. I was sitting at my desk with nothing to do when she appeared. I stood up quickly, crossed the room, and kissed her. You don't look all that surprised to see me, she said, grinning. And who told you that? I replied. General Thompson did, she answered, and I'm glad he did. Let's go home, I said. Her car was packed with her things, and she followed me back to our place. She was stunned to find we had a home of our own. She had assumed we'd be crammed into my BOQ room. It's not much, I told her, but it's ours for now. It's perfect, she said. The next couple of years were steady and fulfilling. Eventually, General Thompson got reassigned to the Pentagon and invited me to go with him. Ingrid and I discussed it, but in the end, we decided to stay in Europe. The general understood and made a call to Saussure, who helped us both secure new assignments at SHAPE. As Mel Brooks once said, it's good to be king. We weren't royalty ourselves, but we were close enough to enjoy some of the benefits. We've now been in Belgium for 3 years and may extend our tour again. Ingrid's been in the service longer, so she'll retire first. When it's my turn, we'll return to the US. But Denmark will always be part of our lives, especially with her family there. Grandma Karen is still with us, alive and doing well, though she now uses a wheelchair. Wesley, Stella, little Philip, and his younger brother Sean have all settled down in Ireland. For now, life is good.